Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue à cette conférence de presse de la Fédération canadienne des municipalités. La présidente de la FCN, Joanne Vanderheyden, le deuxième vice-président de la FCM, Scott Pearce, le président du Forum rural de la FCM, Ray Orb, et le président du Caucus des maires des grandes villes et maire d'Halifax, Mike Savage, prendront la parole dans quelques instants. Nous vous prions de garder votre caméra fermée à tout moment et de couper le son de votre micro. La période des questions débutera après le discours d'ouverture. Vous pourrez poser une question et une question de suivi. Nous vous demandons de vous présenter lorsque vous prendrez la parole et d'indiquer à qui votre question s'adresse. Pour poser vos questions, merci d'envoyer votre nom et le nom du média pour lequel vous travaillez dans le chat commun. Nous vous donnerons la parole lorsque ce sera votre tour de poser une question. Merci. Good morning. Welcome to this Federation of Canadian Municipalities press conference. FCM President Joanne Vanderheyden, FCM's second Vice President Scott Pearce, FCM Rural Forum Chair Ray Orb, and Big City Mayor's Caucus President and Halifax Mayor Mike Savage will deliver remarks shortly. We ask that you keep your camera off at all times and that your microphones remain muted. The question period will begin after the speeches, and you will be able to ask one question and one follow-up. Please introduce yourself when you have the floor and identify to whom the question is directed. To be able to ask questions, please send your name and the name of the media you're working for in the comment chat. We will unmute you when it will be your turn to ask a question. Thank you, and over to you, Ms. Vanderheyden.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I want to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from Treaty 21 territory. My name is Joanne Vanderheyden, President of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. FCM unites more than 2,000 cities and communities of all sizes, representing more than 90% of Canadians in every province and territory. We've all learned so much from this pandemic. We've seen COVID-19 expose some real cracks in the foundation of this incredible country. We're resolved to become more resilient to future threats, whether that's a virus or climate change. And most of all, we've seen how much we can achieve when we all work together. After everything we've been through, Canadians deserve a recovery they can see and feel in their daily lives. As the governments closest to Canadians, that is what local leaders do best. We deliver frontline solutions that make people's lives better. And we do it in ways that tackle big national challenges, from job creation to climate change to the housing crisis. So this election, FCM's message to every federal party is clear. If you want to drive a strong, inclusive and sustainable recovery, local governments are your essential partner. After all, cities and communities are where we all live, work, start businesses, and raise our families. That's where local leaders have been protecting residents, businesses, and vital services all pandemic long. And they're where big national challenges can be addressed first, fastest, and most effectively. Today, on behalf of cities and communities, FCM is bringing forward frontline solutions for Canada's recovery. Our recommendations strengthen local resilience to protect people from extreme weather while scaling up local projects that get us closer to net zero emissions. Everything from deep building retrofits to green municipal fleets to natural infrastructure. Our recommendations include ways to end chronic homelessness and make housing more affordable for everyone. And because Canada's recovery will only succeed if it includes communities of all sizes, we're also proposing solutions to help rural and northern communities reach their full potential. Like permanently doubling the Canada Community Build Fund, which empowers every community in every region to create more jobs and improve people's quality of life. And like moving faster to finally bring reliable, high-speed internet to all Canadians. These are just some of the frontline solutions that FCM is laying out today. Our recommendations show what's possible when governments work together for Canadians. And they're rooted in one of the pandemic's most important lessons, Directly empowering local leaders strengthens Canada's front lines. Municipal leaders see what's needed on the ground and what works in our communities. We've shown this all pandemic long. Every big issue we see in this election, from creating jobs to ending chronic homelessness to reaching net zero emissions, every one of them plays out in our communities. Not only does this make them shared objectives for municipal leaders, it makes us key partners in achieving them. From coast to coast to coast, local leaders are ready to work with every federal party to drive frontline solutions for Canadians. We're ready to build an even better Canada on the other side of COVID. Now I'll turn it over to FCM's second Vice President, Scott Pearce.
Sorry about that, took some time to unmute. Thank you very much, Madame la Présidente. Bonjour à tous, merci d'être avec nous aujourd'hui et merci de votre intérêt. La Fédération canadienne des municipalités représente plus de 90% de la population canadienne et je suis fier d'unir ma voix à celle de nos 2000 municipalités membres pour dévoiler nos solutions de première ligne pour la relance. Nos recommandations électorales sont le résultat de ce qu'on a vécu pendant la pandémie. La COVID a démontré les inégalités et a montré qu'on devrait être mieux préparé pour affronter les menaces qui nous guettent. Que ce soit une pandémie ou des catastrophes naturelles qui ont des conséquences de plus en plus néfastes pour les municipalités, on a vu que la seule façon de relever ces défis, c'était de travailler tout le monde ensemble. Après tout ce qu'on a traversé, après tout ce qu'on a réussi à faire pendant la pandémie, il faut qu'on continue à travailler ensemble pour offrir une relance qui améliore la qualité de vie des gens dans nos communautés, partout au Canada. Il faut se préparer et protéger nos citoyens en s'adaptant aux catastrophes naturelles de plus en plus extrêmes et ainsi faire face aux inondations, feux de forêt et aux sécheresses. Doubler de manière permanente des investissements du Fonds pour le développement des collectivités du Canada va permettre de renforcer notre résilience face au changement climatique, d'entretenir les infrastructures publiques qui sont importantes pour notre qualité de vie et de relancer nos économies locales et nationales. Il faut renouveler nos infrastructures plus rapidement, comme nos routes, nos équipements de traitement des eaux usées, nos installations sportives et récréatives et nos bâtiments publics. On propose aussi des solutions pour d'autres enjeux stratégiques, comme l'accès à l'Internet en région, le transport en commun, les services d'autobus interrégionaux, l'accès à des logements abordables et les solutions nature pour lutter et s'adapter au changement climatique. Toutes les recommandations que l'on fait pendant la campagne électorale ont une chose en commun. Elles ont été pensées sur le terrain par et pour les gouvernements de proximité que sont les municipalités, car elles sont plus près des gens. Notre message est clair auprès de tous les partis politiques durant cette campagne électorale. Pour une relance forte, inclusive et durable, les gouvernements de proximité sont des partenaires incontournables. On connaît notre terrain, on connaît les défis des municipalités, on sait ce qui fonctionne et donne des résultats. Et cela touche autant les grandes villes que les cantons et les noyaux villageois. Ce que nous proposons va créer des emplois locaux et servir nos concitoyens. Nos propositions électorales sont des solutions concrètes pour construire des collectivités plus fortes et plus justes pour l'avenir. La dernière année n'a pas été facile. Les gens veulent voir des choses concrètes et tangibles. Ils veulent qu'on ressorte de la pandémie encore plus forte qu'avant. Tout ça, ça passe par nos villes et nos communautés. Tous les élus municipaux sont prêts à travailler avec tous les partis politiques pour atteindre notre objectif. Merci beaucoup de votre attention et votre intérêt. Maintenant, je cède la parole au président du Caucus des maires des grandes villes de la FCM, le maire d'Halifax, M. Mike Savage.
Good morning.
Actually,
I think it's Ray.
Actually, Scott, I'm going to take over this next section. But thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Vice President Pearce. And good morning, everyone. I'm Ray Orb, and I'm Reeve of the Rural Municipality of Pearce, Saskatchewan, and chair of FCM's Rural Forum. Across the country, Canada's rural communities play an integral role in driving our national economy. We're home to key industries like agriculture, manufacturing, and natural resources, and generate nearly 1/3 of Canada's GDP. Like our urban counterparts, rural leaders have been on the front lines of protecting people, businesses, and vital services all pandemic long. And like our urban counterparts, we're going to be essential to Canada's recovery. And you'll see this reflected throughout the recommendations FCM is bringing today. Like in our call to finally bring high-speed internet to all Canadians, while millions of people in this country have gone online for work, school, and basic human interaction, too many rural Canadians still don't have that option. In our modern world, access to broadband means that small businesses can sell their goods online, farmers can find real-time data, and entire communities can reach their full potential. That's why FCM is recommending concrete steps to bring fast, reliable, and affordable internet to every Canadian, no matter where they live. You'll also see the importance of rural communities in FCM's call to permanently double the Canada Community Building Fund. And doubling down on this proven tool would create good jobs and better quality of life in communities of all sizes. As rural leaders, we all know our communities best. Directly empowering rural expertise would enable us to drive smart infrastructure solutions that meet the unique needs of our residents. You'll see rural communities in FCM's climate resilience solutions as well. And the fact is, extreme weather doesn't discriminate between big city and rural communities. Smaller communities like mine need the right tools to protect people from floods, wildfires, and extreme heat. And so we're proposing ways to ensure communities of all sizes can do exactly that. Rural transportation is also a key part of FCM's transit recommendations. Getting people moving matters everywhere. Cutting commutes and emissions matters everywhere. And the loss of inter-community bus routes that so many rural communities relied on hurts our national economy. That's why we're urging all federal parties to make rural mobility and rural transportation a priority. And as President Vanderheyden said earlier, to succeed, Canada's recovery needs to take root in communities of all sizes, from coast to coast to coast. 10 million Canadians call rural Canada home. They're entrepreneurs, farmers, engineers, small business owners, nurses, and more. They move their communities forward, and they move this country forward. As rural leaders, we're ready to work with every federal party to build a recovery that everyone can take part in. Now I'll turn it over to Halifax Mayor and Chair of FCM's Big City Mayor Caucus, Mike Savage.
Well, thank you very much, Ray and Scott, as well. Good morning, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis très heureux d'être ici avec vous, avec mes collègues. I'm Mike Savage. I'm the mayor of Halifax and chair of FCM's Big City Mayors Caucus. And I come to you from Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And the peace and friendship treaties are something that we recognize and honor. The frontline solutions that FCM is proposing today are designed to make people's lives better. They're also designed to tackle major national challenges that continue to play out in cities and communities across the country, like the housing crisis. COVID-19 has shown the depths of Canada's housing crisis, from essential workers who go home to inadequate housing, to vulnerable Canadians who have no home to go to at all. As frontline governments, local leaders bring crucial expertise to the table, and we're proposing constructive ways to end chronic homelessness and boost affordability across the housing spectrum. From scaling up the Rapid Housing Initiative to expanding affordable rental options in ways that work locally. FCM is also proposing frontline solutions to the climate crisis. Canada is warming at 2 to 3 times the global average. We're seeing the havoc that this is causing in all of our communities, like this summer's extreme heat and devastating fires. Municipal leaders are already doing important work on the ground. What's needed now is unprecedented federal investments in local resilience and disaster mitigation projects, in low carbon infrastructure like public transit and water management, and in local pathways that will get Canada to net zero emissions. So today we're sharing concrete ways that federal and municipal governments can work together to protect lives and safeguard communities. Transit. We know that continuing to expand modern transit systems is key to building livable and competitive cities, as well as to achieving Canada's climate goals. And we know that rural transportation, like intercommunity bus routes, is just as vital to economic growth. Transit systems have taken a real hit during this pandemic, and that's why we're calling for federal leadership to address the operating revenue shortfalls that transit systems continue to face. I've got to tell you, these shortfalls are blowing a hole in municipal budgets and could undermine the job-creating capital projects that will drive Canada's recovery. We're urging federal parties to lock in the permanent, predictable transit investments that cities and communities need to move forward on long-term expansions for Canadians. Now, of course, job creation and economic growth are going to be vital components of Canada's recovery. Our housing, climate, and transit solutions all generate good jobs. FCM is also proposing that the federal government permanently double the Canada Community Building Fund, formerly known as the gas tax. Simply put, this is one of the very best job-creating tools in Canada, directly empowering communities of all sizes to renew infrastructure faster would create jobs and growth for years to come. It would mean better roads to move people and goods, modern rec centers for kids and seniors, and so much more. Every one of the recommendations that we're releasing is geared to promoting a more inclusive recovery. Whether it's addressing the inadequate, overcrowded housing that's disproportionately impacting racialized Canadians, or building better transit so frontline workers can get to work safely and quickly, or renewing community infrastructure that brings people together. In today's world, we need to prioritize digital inclusion for all Canadians. Fast and reliable broadband internet is essential to our economy and to modern quality of life. The pandemic has exposed how Canada's digital divide continues to hurt rural, remote, northern, and Indigenous communities. As Ray said, FCM is recommending concrete steps to ensure that all Canadians can connect online to modern commerce, to modern opportunities, and to each other. Cities and communities of all sizes have been on the front lines of COVID-19 since day one, and will be on the forefront of Canada's recovery. The solutions that FCM is putting forward today present a clear path to a strong, inclusive, and sustainable future. They reflect our frontline expertise of what's needed on the ground and what works in our communities. This election, we're calling on every federal party to work with Canada's municipal leaders, and that is how we will drive the recovery that Canadians deserve. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I will hand it back over to Mayor Vanderheyden and FCM staff to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Mayor Savage. It's it's great to hear you all. So to be able to ask questions, please send your name and the name of the media outlet you're working for in the comment chat. And please introduce yourself when you have the floor. Identify the person to whom the question is directed. Pour poser vos questions, amis journalistes, veuillez envoyer votre nom et le nom du média pour lequel vous travaillez dans le chat commun. Le modérateur et moi vous donnerons la parole quand ce sera votre tour de poser une question. First question is for Jordan Press, Canadian Press.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time. My question, first off, maybe Mayor Savage and President Vanderheyden, maybe the two of you can take a stab at this first, which is just about the transit funding that you're asking for to help with the operating shortfalls. I'm wondering first if you can maybe describe a bit about how big those shortfalls are across the country for some municipalities, but also maybe make the case for doing so and continuing to invest in transit, given that we may be heading into a post-pandemic world where
during COVID. And we know that it's going to take a while for people to fully come back to all the different forms of transit we need. But let's remember that transit was absolutely essential in order to get people to work, essential workers, not nurses and doctors, public health officials, but also people who work in grocery stores and in drugstores and so many other services that had to stay open, that they could not have stayed open without transit. So we had to keep running transit. Even when the revenue was down. In some cases, we didn't charge revenue during COVID. In other cases, revenue was down because there was less ridership. So there's money to be made up there, and through the restart agreement that that came from the feds and some of the provinces last year, that was helpful. But we don't know how long it's going to take to get our transit back. But it's more important than ever that we support transit, that we move to net zero ways of transit, that we have electrifications of fleet, that we have bus rapid transit, that we have effective ways for people to move around throughout the pandemic. And also, let's not forget investments in active transportation as well. A lot of people started walking, to work or around their communities during COVID. We need to make sure that active transportation is part of that. And also, as we mentioned before, and as Ray mentioned, intercity, community bus routes as well, which took a hit during COVID. So all of those things really identify the need for mass investments, both on the capital side, which we're asking for to permanent funding for transit so that we can electrify fleets or move to low carbon fleets so that we can have better transit routes for all, that we can increase the active transportation options, whether it's cycling or walking or rollerblading. All of those things are going to be more important, I think, than ever. So we're looking for immediate help on the holes that the cities have. In our case, it was, $2 to $4 million a month revenue shortfall for a mid-sized city, and people have seen the numbers from Toronto and Vancouver, but also to continue the major investments so that we can modernize sustainably our transit systems.
Jordan, if you want to have a follow-up question, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks, Fleming. My follow-up question is actually for Mr. Org. Just because there is a portion in here not about engaging Western Canadian municipal leaders on place-based economic development and pathways to net zero emissions. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what that might mean in the short term and in the long term, what that might look like if the federal government actually did get involved in some of those discussions.
As far as transit, I assume that's what the question would be. Actually, Western Canadian leaders have been engaged through FCM. We've been, discussing this for a long time, and we know that we need to have inter-community bus service. That's affordable, but that is energy efficient as well, and reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And there is a role as well for rail service, to be played into that. So I'm assuming that's the line of your questioning, but we have been developed through FCM, a Western Canadian Municipal Task Force that's looked at all of these things as well as a lot of other things that we could talk about a bit later.
Any other questions from media? Questions des journalistes? Ne vous gênez pas. Jordan, if you have another follow-up, go ahead.
Well, since I have everybody's attention, maybe more of a broad question for everyone, which is, we are heading into a post-pandemic world where federal finances are going to be a little tighter than they were potentially prior to the pandemic, just given all the spending that has happened. And there's a long list of requests here. And looking ahead, can you just talk about the confidence you have that some of these, or that maybe you'd have all of these that would show up in a federal budget from whoever forms government afterwards, and that they wouldn't necessarily be maybe punted down the road while the federal government gets its financial house in order?
Well, I'll start answering that one, Jordan. And I just wanted to mention that, a lot of these things are urgent. They need to happen now. These are not wishes. This is needs. So we're talking about renewing core infrastructure, building modern transit, tackling the housing crisis, protecting people from climate extremes. These truly are not just nice to have. These are essential for Canadians coast to coast to coast, regardless of who's in power at the federal level. And among governments, municipalities truly are, you've heard it from all of us, closest to the people's daily lives. We see what's needed, what works on the ground, and we're ready to work with every single federal party to deliver frontline solutions to some of Canada's biggest national challenge. It's about investing, it's about economic recovery, and generating growth. Anybody else want to speak to this? Mayor Savage?
Sorry.
Oh,
I could comment as well. Just on the broadband file, I think that's something that the country needs. Rural Canada needs better broadband service. Mr. Savage talked about that. Even the importance to the urban because of the connectivity issues with urban and rural. But that money, that we're asking for, to be able to be spent every year, in addition to the Universal Broadband Fund, for at least $150 million every year for the next 4 years, I think will go a long way. It's money well spent, but it's integral to the national economy to be able to get our economy moving again. And if we don't spend that money, I think we're going to be a lot worse off. And it showed up obviously during COVID that we have so many connectivity issues out in rural Canada. So that's my comment on that.
Mayor Savage?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so it's a good question. It's a natural question. Where's the money going to come from for all the things that Canada needs? We do have a deficit in Canada, financial deficit, but we also have an infrastructure deficit. We have work that needs to be done. We've seen the fires and the flooding that has happened across the country. I'm sitting in Halifax. We're getting the remnants of Hurricane Ida that swept through New Orleans and hit New York and New Jersey yesterday. And these are investments that we need to make as cities in the future of our cities. And so I think Canadians have shown they support investments in people and in infrastructure. I think that people recognize the need. We saw that during COVID, that people respond positively to governments that invest in people and invest in infrastructure. And, as municipal governments, the old story, we have 60% of the infrastructure and 10% of the taxes. And so it's not something we can do without the support of provincial and federal, both orders of government, both of the other lesser orders of government than municipalities. We all have to work together. There's a role for everybody.
Thank you. Last opportunity to ask questions, reporters. C'est votre dernière opportunité de poser des questions si vous en avez. So I think it means it's the end of the press conference. Thank you all very much to attend this press conference. Merci beaucoup à tous pour avoir participé à cette conférence de presse. And have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.